Well, aloha kakahiaka. That's the right word. Aloha kakahiaka, which is good morning in Hawaiian. Everybody, this is the pre-show, the pre-game show here, and we got a few minutes to talk story, and kind of warm ourselves up a little bit. And got all my friends over here. I got Scott and Heidi and Dylan. Everyone's here. How y'all doing over there? Dylan, what's the? We'll start with you here. We'll go counterclockwise. How's things going on over there?
Oh, it's another beautiful day over here. We were just talking prior to coming on that Kona, the weather has changed a little bit since the volcano stopped a couple of years ago, and it's been a lot more rainy, and not overly rainy, but we've been getting afternoon and evening showers pretty regularly, almost every day, and it's been about 2 or 3 days of no rain, so that's been nice. Everything's starting to dry up a little bit.
We're gonna have to have a segment about that overall, because the VOG changes on the Big Island have been really significant. Because of the VOG has gone away, because of the volcanoes have become rather inactive. It's changed the nature of the weather patterns on the Big Island, which is really remarkable. Heidi, how are things in beautiful Maui?
Things are great here. I'm happy to be out of quarantine now.
Right, you're out of quarantine. You're free. You're free. How does that feel?
Oh, it feels great. I mean, what I love about living here is just being outside. So now I can do that again. Last night, the moon was amazing. The visibility of the night sky here is just really incredible. So we were outside, just kind of enjoying the nice weather. And yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, great, and happy to have Jim. Jim is one of our absolute most reliable regulars. He's always here. Jim, thanks for being here with us on this pregame. Scott, unmute yourself and fill us in on what's going on over there. How's things on our side of the island?
It's good, except I think Dylan and I keep switching weather patterns here. I finally get clouds over here at Diamond Head, which I haven't had in probably 3 months. It's always been crystal clear and sunny until this morning. They get some clouds finally, but overall, perfect, great temperature. The trades are still blowing. You can see the palm trees in the back still moving, so it's a nice, cool feel.
Yeah, actually, you got you've got those coconut trees are like a little weather indicator for us over here. We got the trades moving. I can kind of see them blowing in one direction. And it's been really fun. Oh, hey, so let's do our little. We have a few minutes here. Let's do our normal Aloha shirt a review. And Dylan, what do you look like? You're wearing a Big Island version here of something. You're muted. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, this is Sig Zane, my go-to. I got probably more Sig Zanes than anybody else, but again, that's a local designer out of Hilo. This shirt's probably 15 years old. It's one of the second or third ones that I got years ago. So when I started becoming a grown up and having to wear collared shirts to work, so one of my favorites. It's a poinsettia pattern.
Oh, awesome. Scott, what's your shirt du jour today?
Yeah, I got a Rin Spooner, one that I've had probably 15 years as well, and it's held up beautifully. These things, they never fall apart. They're some of the most reliable shirts I've ever had. And I used to bartend in a lot of them, and they still held up over all the years.
So this is the thing about guys, Heidi. Is that guys will wear shirts for 15 years. I can't even. The shirt that I'm wearing is so darn old. I can't even remember when I bought it there. What's your story today, Heidi?
Well, I don't have any fashion news today, but something that I do appreciate is just the professional business attire on Maui is not having to wear suits, and it's not super formal. So I like to stay comfortable and stay cool, and I enjoy that.
We take that so for granted, right? We take that so for granted. And then, then you go to the mainland and everyone's wearing suits or whatever, or there's a lot of formalities. I think that's, I believe that's changing, but still, it is just such a blessing to be able to kind of go around here in shirts. And of course, now because of COVID, we're sitting at our desks and, you don't have, no one's watching let's say the shoes you're wearing, or what kind of pants you're wearing, or shorts or not. No one has any idea, which is even more fun. We even have more flexibility over here. All right. So it is that time of the hour. We got a bunch of people here with us. Let's kind of get our little show started over here. This is the official start of the show. I want to welcome everybody here to the Aloha Friday Hawaii show, and we've got our normal lineup over here. So let's get started. We're gonna talk about open up with our COVID update. Gang, here's what it comes down to. My headline here is no end in sight. It's just been a mess. At the government level, the Hawaii Department of Health, there's been exits of high level folks. They are, quote, retiring, to spend time with family. The lead of the Department of Health is retiring. The second in command of Hawaii of the Department of Health retired. A newly hired in July contact tracing expert decided to now ask for leave. Won't be coming back until things are quote, things are better. And then just yesterday, the state lead epidemiologist also is walking. So it is a mess. Economically, it's bad. Hawaiian Airlines announced major layoffs going on. A lot of the hotel resorts announced major layoffs going on. My connection with the business community has given me some sort of insight. This secondary shutdown that came again has really wiped out a lot of the restaurants that were kind of hanging on by a thread. So there's a sort of a lot of last straw stuff that's going on. So the carnage, the economic carnage as a result of what's been going on in Hawaii is going to continue, unfortunately. And I don't see an end in sight. Let's just kind of go real quick around before we get into our real estate market update. Scott, let's just go in order, in vertical order. Scott, Heidi, and Dylan. Scott, you see anything you want to add to the COVID mess over here?
No, I mean, you've hit it all. The one that I chuckled about, I think it was yesterday, they closed down H3 for the surge testing, right? And I guess they went to the federal government for approval to be able to shut down the H3 because it's not a city, county, or state road. And the federal government said, no, you can't do that. And I thought, and the state went ahead with it anyway. And I thought to myself, oh, wow, okay, we picked the only road in the state or on this island, basically, that's not state or county related. And it could affect how we get funding on the transportation side here. And it just adds to the mess that these guys have been, heaping on themselves.
So for people who don't know, H3 is, we actually, Hawaii, interestingly enough, has interstate highways. They don't go to any other state. I think we are the only state with an interstate highway maybe Alaska too, I'm not sure. But anyway, H3 is one of the more newest highways. And frankly, I thought it was a great idea. They made it, they used H3 because it's huge, it's long, it's straight. There's not a lot of exits, or there's no exits or on ramps, and it could be a gigantic long line. But anyway, they wiped it out. Heidi, what's the latest with COVID? You're free, actually, right? Our last exciting episode, you were in quarantine, and now you are a free woman now. What's the situation like going on Maui?
Well, on Maui, the beaches are still open, so I'm grateful for that. People are just kind of laying low these days and being cautious, but just really hopeful and looking forward to a safe reopening at some point. So I mean, it's just really, everybody's kind of waiting. There's not much to do. The area where I live in, I mean, it's heavily a resort area. So most people's jobs are related to the visitor industry, regardless of what the job is. So
yeah, I'm always getting hit pretty hard, really hard.
Yeah, people are just laying low right now. Neighbors are helping each other out, and yeah, I mean, we've been in this going on 6 months. So
I don't talk about this too often, but my COVID beard is getting a curl. I'm starting to curl. That's how long my COVID beard is. It's curling, and this was a joke at first that I was going to grow until that we were freed, but we're not freed yet. Dylan, what's the COVID atmosphere like on the Big Island?
I guess I don't want to contradict Heidi, but or be a downer, but one of the things that concerns me about the overall, I mean, aside from all of the bigger picture economic things, is the cultural impact it's having on people. I'm seeing people, being suspicious of their friends and their neighbors, and saying they're going to turn people in if they're not adhering to different rules and regulations, and it's just not a good thing for our community and for our interpersonal relationships. And so when I see that kind of stuff, some of it's on social media, so it's not super widespread, but we had a situation here on a big island where there was a local entertainer who passed away, and there was a big funeral. And then I guess there was a cluster from that, or some people claimed there was, and then, people were blaming them, and it just creates division within the community when we really don't need that at this time. And so that's just one thing that I see that concerns me, is the impact on our people and the culture, where we should be taking care of each other and looking after each other. And instead we're becoming suspicious of each other.
That's a really, really good point. And I think that's a whole other topic unto itself, of all the changes that are going on with COVID. But speaking of changes, let's move on to our next topic here. And let's do a quick real estate market update. There was one question that popped in on this real estate market, and I think it's somewhat indicative of a lot of the questions that we get. So Dylan, why don't you kind of start us off on the discussion about market updates in real estate? So this is Terry and Denise, who actually live in Hawaii Paradise Park on the Big Island. They say, after recently purchasing on the Big Island and with a presidential election and COVID-19, where do you see the market in 5 years? So Dylan, give us a combination of both your planned market update for this week and a little bit of an answer to what Terry and Denise are wondering about.
Well, first thing, I don't have any market data per se, because our MLS is a little bit slower on the Big Island. So our data doesn't come out to usually 7-8 days into the following month. But I can just tell you from what I'm experiencing, the volume is still there. There is, we're definitely on the road to recovery, and the demand is still there. We closed 3 deals last week and put 3 more into escrow. So there wasn't any, we're not seeing any slowdown. There was another closing today, and potentially another escrow today. So there's still a lot of activity. I don't see any reason to believe, and again, we don't have a crystal ball and we can't predict the future, but I don't have any reason to believe that in 5 years the market isn't going to continue to be strong. And we haven't had that bubble type market, and everybody's worried about the bubble bursting. But if you compare the market today to the market back in 2006 and 2007, there's a lot of other underlying factors, like the lending regulations that were running wild and people getting loans that shouldn't get loans, and that stuff's not happening today. So I think going forward, you don't have too much to worry about, and especially in areas like East Hawaii, where you're not as dependent on tourism. You're not going to have as many people that can't pay their mortgage, or a lack of buyer demand, because a lot of people that work there work in the industries that are in Hilo or for the government, the state or county government. So the employment's a little bit more stable in that area. So it depends on your market too.
Got it. So what I'm hearing you say is pretty much, no major changes. Things are still going strong. There's no reason to kind of think that there's going to be any kind of major upheaval in either direction. I think part of that reason why is I used to tell people, because we don't take part of the party of the bubble. We don't go to the party. We also don't get the hangover. Scott, what's the latest on kind of what you're seeing on Oahu?
Yeah, we're on a shutdown right now, meaning that economically, so what that means for real estate at this point is we are classified as essential. Transactions are still going, and I'm still seeing the same thing. So actually, our number of sales for single family homes has gotten back to where we were pre-COVID period. However, there were 1,600 new listings on the market last year at this time for single family homes, and there's now 800. So significantly less inventory, a lot more buyer demand. So, and this isn't totally normal. I mean, I talked about that transaction last week, 16 offers, 100 grand over, we lost it. Right. I just talked to someone in Mililani. They had 25 offers on a property in Mililani on a single family home.
25 offers on a property?
Yeah. So there's competition.
So this trend that you've mentioned, Scott, over week upon week, which has been that there's a lot less listings on the market, but there are just as many, if not more, buyers on the market, and I think that combined with this lower interest rate or something like that, right?
Yeah, I would actually say there are less buyers in the market just because you've eliminated the offshore buyer. But
less buyers, right?
But the decrease in number of sellers versus the number of buyers is greater on the listing side. The other thing is the military 2 months ago just started moving people again, which Oahu has all the bases. This is where they come to. So that added to the demand. And then our summertime is the busiest time of the year for moving because kids are out of school typically, et cetera. And that's where families tend to try to plan their moves. So we're definitely right in the middle of this summer rush. which carries typically through September. And we don't tail off like the mainland because of the cold weather. We have warm weather all year round. People can move and see property fairly easily because of the temperatures. So we do continue throughout the year, but we are in the chunk of our busiest time.
Got it. Thanks, Scott. Heidi, what's the situation like? What's the market looking like in Maui? What can you share for us? And back to that original question, if you have any sense of kind of what do you see kind of going on in a 5-year period, if you can shed any light on that.
Well, August was a really strong month on Maui in terms of closings and also new properties going under contract. Extremely busy month. We're seeing more homes than condos selling in previous years. So demand for single family homes is very high. I mean, we're seeing more inventory come on the market for condos. I mean, both residential condos and resort condos. Here and there, you'll get a super motivated seller, but for the most part, prices are holding really strong. There are people that are predicting that once the quarantine lifts, there's going to be a flood of buyers in our market because there certainly seems to be a lot of demand. Sales are a bit limited because buyers who do want to travel to Maui find it more difficult with the quarantine these days, understandably. There's recent discussion on the new federal eviction moratorium through the end of the year and how that's going to impact the market. There are owners who own rental properties who have been personally impacted by COVID or lost their jobs, and then their tenants have lost their jobs, and that's a challenge. So that could have some impacts down the road, but probably nothing is going to happen right now. But it continues to be a busy market. I mean, overall, all the stats point to it being pretty stable. We're seeing a little bit more inventory in the condo market right now. So I think for a buyer who's looking to have a bit less competition than normal, wouldn't be a bad time to look over on Maui.
Heidi, I'm so glad you brought that up because I think we touched on this in some of our off-camera discussions, and I think we should touch base on that a little bit and talk amongst ourselves on that. And that is, I think, this idea that there's a general feeling or a general sentiment that there is pent-up demand that's being sort of held back, and when COVID gets lifted, if that ever happens, if COVID gets lifted, there's going to be this sort of, kind of rush of potential buyers. And so the feeling that I've caught, and let's kind of quickly go around and touch on this topic. Dylan, we'll start with you. We talked about this idea that, hey, if you're a potential buyer and if you're serious about buying, you might want to try to, go through the quarantine hurdles. If you need to come over here, go through those quarantine hurdles and get in front of the buyers that will inevitably be coming. In other words, there was potentially a window of opportunity here for you if you sort of beat the crowd. Dylan, what's your sort of beat the crowd feeling on that?
Absolutely, no doubt about that. I mean, every day I talk to somebody who can't wait to come here and look for property. But there are some. I wrote a $600,000 cash offer yesterday for a couple that made the decision to just come out here, quarantine for their 14 days, and they had the luxury of taking a 3 or 4 week trip out here in order to serve the quarantine and look. But that was their mindset, is we want to get out of where we're at on the East Coast and get here as soon as possible. And so they're one of those the house that I closed on today was also a buyer from California that wanted to get here sooner rather than later, and came out, served their quarantine, and then purchased, and went back to the main, made the offer, inspected, and then went back to the mainland and closed, and is coming back today to serve out their second quarantine in their new home. But there's definitely there are few people that are taking the initiative in doing that. But if you wait 2, 3, 4 months, once things open up, everybody who's been waiting is going to be here, and it's going to be a lot more competitive market.
Okay, so that's Scott. We're going to go to you in a second. I kind of really want to emphasize that, and I guess I want to kind of sort of essentially pitch the benefit of being a part of our Ohana here. There's 30 people live that are watching this right now. You folks are getting this kind of right on the line, and you're getting it in what I really love about what we've done. And I so appreciate you, Heidi, and you, Scott, and you, Dylan, for being a part of this, because this is the only show that I know of where we get like an island, a statewide kind of analysis, every 2 weeks. Scott, are the gates of buyers waiting to be busted down when quarantine comes around?
Absolutely. I mean, Dylan hit the nail on the head, and I had that conversation this morning. I've had it probably 7 times in the last 2 weeks with people going, "Hey, we're waiting." I said, "Hey, look, maybe you don't want to wait, and here's why. Rentals are more affordable right now. You have more flexibility on the length of time that you could do a rental. Yes, you have to quarantine for 14 days, but if you got a place for 2-3 months or however long you need it, to kind of get situated in this stuff, you got more flexibility on the rental side to be able to get here and get settled. There's, less demand from people. You have more to choose from. You can be more flexible with that rental price. So now once you do the 2 weeks, now you can get out in the market without the rest of the mainland buyer pool being right there with you. You're out ahead of them. So, old supply and demand, you add more demand to the situation. I don't see the supply increasing. That should lead to a price increasing or more competition on the buy side.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, you're it's like those midnight sales for like Black Friday, right, where you're able to get into the store before everybody else. That's kind of what it sort of feels like here. So
let's hope we don't see any Walmart fighting over houses.
There'll be no Walmart fighting.
And two other quick points on this. One is a lot of people are already teleworking, right? So if you're sitting at home teleworking anyways, you can come here and sit in a hotel room and telework from here. So you're not really taking a vacation per se, right? You're just working from a different place. And then the second one is we're seeing a lot already right now of competitive offers like Scott was talking about with multiple offers. So if you're a buyer who doesn't have cash or doesn't have 50% or 25% to put down, you would put yourself in a better position now being here with less competition, because I'm seeing all across the state where people who are doing, VA loans, FHA loans that are low down payment, you basically have the least amount of, or you have the weakest offer when you're up against cash. You're up against somebody who's putting 50% down. So if you're in that type of situation financially where you want to take advantage of a low down payment loan program, or you just can't do that and you're going to do maybe a 10% down program or something like that, it's better to do it now than it is later when everybody with cash shows up and is bidding on those same houses.
This is back to that same idea of sort of get in before the wave that all of us unanimously here, Heidi has, every one of you, Heidi, Scott, and Dylan, you've all said, hey, no question, this wave is coming. I think that's a fair thing. Scott, I know that you're working with Teresa and them folks, and she wants to be first in line. Well, come on down, Teresa. We definitely want to have you here. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, yeah, one last thing I wanted to mention, because if I'm not mistaken, so Oahu economically is shut down right now, or we're doing the stay-at-home order again, but the outer islands aren't, correct? So for us, there are no open houses right now, which means private showings, which means we're a little restrictive on the flow. But where I'm really seeing some of the challenges, kids are back in school now, so they're doing stay-at-home, distance learning from home. So now when I get a transaction into escrow, I have a difficult time because the home inspectors don't want anybody in the home when they want to do the home inspections. The families that are living there have their kids. They're working from home and the kids are studying from home. Now I have a significant challenge for trying to set up that home inspection appointment for everyone to be out. So our inspection timeframes and contracts are starting to move out a little further. Just an FYI, that's probably kind of good info. I'd like to hear what you guys doing. Are you guys seeing anything similar to that?
Dylan, you see anything?
Yeah, well,
this is the home inspection thing. There's families in the home that the home needs to be inspected, but the inspector wants them out, but they're in because they're working, etc. How's that?
Termite inspection, survey, the whole 9 yards.
All that stuff.
It's definitely more complicated, and it's also more complicated for sellers because they got to go somewhere, right? And so I think that's part of the reason there's less inventory is people are not as comfortable figuring out where they're going to move to. And so you have those two factors that are kind of slowing things down, but definitely getting into houses, and a lot of appraisers don't even want to go inside, which sometimes is a benefit to a buyer, because if they're not seeing the actual condition on the inside, if it's not good, there's less of a chance of that appraisal coming in low. But there's a lot of appraisers that are just doing exterior appraisals right now.
All right, let's this is great. Love this talk. I just love the whole idea that we get this sort of statewide perspective. We get Maui, Big Island, and Oahu perspectives. It's just absolutely fabulous. I love it. Really quick, Ralph asked a question here about drought conditions on West Maui. Ralph, I think Heidi and I, we talked about that weeks ago. It's on the YouTube channel. Heidi, if you recall, right, we asked about water issues on Maui, and there's no issues that are worth mentioning. Have another quick question over here. This is Tony. Tony says, "Aloha, thank you for having your show. Great way for us mainlanders to connect until we can move over." Yes, Tony, that's exactly correct. As a boat owner, are you allowed to keep your boat in most neighborhoods in your driveway? My quick answer to that is it depends on the HOA rules. I think on the residential areas, you can keep it in your driveway, if I'm not mistaken. Is there anything to add on to that real quick? I want to move on. Scott, anything you need to mention? You could put in your driveway. If you can fit it, you can keep it, right? That's all I know. Right? Yeah. Okay.
Rare situations where you'll have HOAs that require cars to be inside the garage or vehicles to be inside the garage, but that's very rare. So in most cases, you should have no problem.
Okay. Is there does anybody else want to throw in anything that's outside of that? Okay.
Yeah, it comes down to the association.
It's on. Okay. All right. So in other words, that's pretty good. It's residential is okay if you can fit it, so to speak. There may be some HOA rules. See that? Okay, great. Okay, let's move on to our next question over here. And this is more of a group discussion, but Heidi, why don't you kind of get the ball rolling here? So here's the question: Is Hawaii affected by climate change? So this is from Mark in Santiago, Chile. And Mark, I want to thank you. You put in a few really good questions over the life of the show, and I appreciate that. And Mark says, "I live in a place that's been severely affected by climate change whereas we've been in a drought for the best part of 15 years. Is Hawaii experiencing any significant impacts due to climate change that could affect the state in the middle to long term? If so, is the local government taking any steps to alleviate it?" Mark, I'm going to hit my favorite topic before I turn over to Heidi to get us rolling. On the government, we can't even keep like a COVID thing under control. So the heck if we're going to do anything about the weather. But Heidi, what have you seen in your years or what you've heard on Maui? What if anything has changed that they've attributed due to climate change?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Mark. I think climate change is affecting all of us wherever we are. And it is a concern for Maui. Maui County's 2020 budget allocated over $2 million in funds for 4 different studies related to addressing the impacts of sea level rise and climate change and how this is going to impact infrastructure and communities. So they're looking at possibly long-term needing to move some coastal roads, perhaps relocating one of our wastewater reclamation facilities. And it's also going to impact residential properties and properties that were built very close to the ocean. I mean, 40, 50 years ago, you could build right up on the water's edge. That's not true today. But these properties still do exist that are built right along the ocean. And even though the state of Hawaii owns the beaches, the property owners that own these oceanfront properties share in the stewardship and often the costs in maintaining the shoreline. So it's definitely a consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Dylan, what's the climate? There's been some serious climate change on the Big Island, but not due to climate change. But anyway, fill us in on the climate change concerns or issues that you know of on the Big Island.
I think in the near term, like in our lifetime, in our kids' lifetime, it really depends on the island. If you're on Kauai or Oahu, where you have a more eroded flat island with lower lying areas, rising sea levels are going to affect those areas more. On the Big Island, we're very steep, and even tsunami inundation zones are very small because the island elevation rises very quickly. And the same is true of Maui in most cases. And so, in the short term, rising sea levels and things like that are not a huge concern for Big Island folks, definitely near the water. But the bigger question is, we go back to the government and what are they doing about it? And that's always a frustration, is regardless of how, what your concerns about climate change are, everybody can agree we need more renewable energy and stop burning fossil fuels. And although we talk about it a lot, there's always a lack of real action or initiative to get those things done. And we got so many natural resources here, geothermal, sun, wind power, where we really shouldn't be getting the bulk of our energy from burning fossil fuels, but we still do that. It's kind of insane. And then you have situations where you have innovative companies that come in and try and do stuff, and then a few people protest it, and then the government supports them or the courts support them, and it gets shut down. So it's that is something that definitely we'd like to see the government take more action on. I don't know if they can change, do anything in the big picture on climate change, but definitely we can do small local stuff like stop burning fossil fuel.
Certainly, fossil fuels I think the mitigation issues are a big deal. Scott, what's the Oahu view on climate change? I've got some stories of my own on Oahu, but I want to hear your point first, Scott.
Yeah, the biggest one I see is Waikiki, where you have the most dense number of condo towers, and if you look at it, the Aloha wraps around behind it. The Aloha Canal, which is fed from the ocean, wraps around behind it. And so as sea level rise happens, Waikiki is probably one of the biggest areas of impact, with a high density, not to mention that's our main tourism hub here on Oahu. So how does sea level rise impact it? And how do you prevent from serious damage happening at some point? I see that as a major concern for the state, because Waikiki alone is a major, one of the most well-known tourist spots here in the state of Hawaii.
Yeah, and the part that's going to be an interesting one on sea level rise. There's been my little story on that is there's a light industrial business district on Oahu called Mapunapuna, and in Mapunapuna I think they're technically below sea level, and when the tides are high, many of the streets are flooded with seawater because of low tides. And during king tides, which is a higher tide, I don't know what the details are about king tides, but the word king means big. So king tide, there's even more flooding. So there's certain parts, and during certain parts of, at the right moment with the right tide, etc., some parts of Mapunapuna are absolutely flooded to the point where you're going to have a hard time driving through it. And I had a friend that one of my first customers, actually, I was just talking to him just the other day, known him for 35 years. And I asked him about over time what has happened to the area, because his business is right next to one of these areas that gets inundated with tide-based flooding. And he said, slowly over the years, it's gotten incrementally worse, which I think is just the natural thing. Now, back to Dylan's point, how much has the government mitigated the issue in Mapunapuna? And I could assure you, nothing has been done at all. It gets bad, it gets worse. Anyway, hope that answered the question, Mark. Dylan, we have to make a mental note. We need to have a special episode in a future show to talk about the weather changes in Kona. It is significant. It's a big deal that's occurred. So we're gonna have to make a note of that to kind of do that. We don't have time for that now, because I want to make a couple of slides on it and then talk about it. All right. Let's see. I think we got a quick question here. By the way, folks, if you got some questions, send it to us right now while you're here. We got 28 people who are live with us. Send us what your question are. I'll do the best I can to pull it up. In fact, let's bring up this one real quick. Well, first of all, there's Teresa again. Thanks, Teresa. Good to see you. Here, this is from Jeremy. Jeremy says, I'm an appraiser and wanting to move to Hawaii. Is there a need for appraisers? So really quick, I'll give you the statewide answer here, Jeremy, state by state. Heidi, what's the market for appraisers in Maui? Do you know?
I mean, I would say the real estate market looks like it's going to be busy for a while, so we could use appraisers.
There you go, Dylan. Yeah. What's the appraiser side?
That's definitely there's a shortage right now, because when we're going through the process, we're always getting them ordered early because they're causing delays where we can't get an appraiser out for 10 days. And then it takes them another 7 days to get us a report. And, it can cause some significant delays in the escrow process.
Okay. So, yes. So there's a shortage of appraisers on the big end. Scott, what's the status of appraisers on Oahu?
Same here. I mean, the demand's here and it should continue. So yeah, you have the option to come over and should be able to drop right in.
Okay, Jeremy, there's your answer, buddy. There is a need, and you can you can pick your island. That's great. Okay, let's kind of hit this next one again. This is the kind of a topic, Scott. I want you to lead it, but I want us all to get in on it as we always do. So near grade schools for 500K. So this is from AJ, and AJ says, we are looking to live near highly rated schools in Oahu for our daughter's education. Is it still possible to find single family fee simple homes around 500K? Also, will there possibly be any that can become available in the foreseeable future, or are those a thing of the past? So we have two topics over here, Scott. One topic is, can we find a single family home practically anywhere on Oahu for 500K? And, can we get one that's near highly rated schools? The school system in Hawaii is a little bit of a different beast. It's a statewide school system. It's not like most of the mainland where schools are district based, where your district determines the kind of school you have. Here, all the schools are of the same. They're part of the Department of Education, which is a statewide thing. So there's not that much variance in schools, but that's my 2 cents. Scott, how do you answer AJ here, who wants a home for 500K near a good school system on Oahu?
Well, the good school system portion, you have public and private. The private schools are significantly highly rated here, and most of them are in the urban core of Honolulu, meaning kind of the Manoa area, so Punahou, Iolani, Mid-Pac, some of those schools, Maryknoll. They're all kind of in the same area in Honolulu. Now, if you want a $500,000 home in the urban core, that's probably not going to exist. $700,000 is about the minimum you want to get into, and anything below that is going to have significant quirks or major work. $700,000 and up starts to get you into something that you could probably live in and work on. Otherwise, now you're getting out. Public schools, you can do not 500,000. We're 600 and up now for the major portions of Oahu. It's not until you get to the leeward coast or even pockets of that windward coast, which the school systems are going to be not as good at that point, that you can get around 500,000 for a single family home.
So really the rule of thumb is, if you want to have a safe margin, you really want to be thinking about 700,000 for a single family home. That's one thing. School systems is a whole other issue. If the private school is an option, you're going to take that private school option. Private schools, however, you're looking at 20 grand per child per year, which is a whole other animal. And public schools, you need to do your research, because those will based on the area. All right, Heidi, what's if we were to kind of say, what would you say if someone says, look, can I get into a single family home for 500,000 near a good school district in Maui? How would you respond to that?
I think you could find a condo for that. For a single family home, the budget's going to need to be a bit higher. You will be looking starting in the 700-800 range for a single family home. For a condo, you can find a 2-bedroom condo. There's some as low as the mid 300s. So you could find a condo, probably not a single family home for that budget.
What's the school system? I'm sorry, Heidi. What's the school system like? Let's say you said 800,000. So we say, okay, 800,000 for a single family home in Maui. What are the school systems like on Maui? Private schools, public schools? What's that? What does that look like?
Well, there's both private and public schools. Private schools, as you mentioned, it's going to be a significant cost for admission. The 2 main private schools are Seabury, which is upcountry, and then Maui Prep, which is in West Maui. And then there's some good charter schools as well. So you definitely have some different options. When I'm working with buyers who have kids and the school is an important thing, usually that's the whole beginning of the real estate discussion, just kind of finding out and going. Often I'll have people go and interview at the different schools and check out the different schools before we even start looking at a property, because I know it is really important to live close to school, especially if you're going to be going back and forth all the time. So it's a great starting point for your real estate search.
Excellent, thanks, Dylan. What's sort of like the floor that you would give for finding a single family home, and how does that compare and contrast to the school choices that are available on the Big Island?
Pretty similar to Scott and Heidi in terms of if you want a highly rated school. And, the reality is that the better the schools are, usually the price points around those schools are higher. And it's a function of the population that lives around there and the parents and, the demographics. So most of the time, the higher the price points, the better the schools are near them. Even though our property taxes don't pay for the schools, it's just more a function of the community and the type of people that live in those areas. Like the highest, the best public school on the Kona side is in Aloha, which is, you're probably not going to get into anything under 800,000 in that area.
Okay, so I'm hearing you kind of say throw out the 800,000 number too for a single family home if you want to be near a good area or environment that has access to a good school system. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you can always do condos, but condos are, significantly smaller square footage, and you're still looking at, 400,000 for a decent condo in those areas.
So really, to answer AJ's fundamental question, AJ, I have to tell you, it seems to me like 500K homes are a thing of the past. I don't. Does anybody raise your hands if anyone sees 500K homes coming back anytime in the foreseeable future? Yeah, not going to happen. So
we got plenty of 500K homes, but
there you go.
but they're out in the country, and your schools are not going to be the schools are going to be further away because distance wise, the homes are more rural. But a lot of times those schools are the ones that have more challenges.
So thank you, Dylan, for pointing that out. I'm sure we can find some homes on all the islands for 500K, but they're not going to fit the other criteria that you're looking for. And real quick, Jim's question: how is the school system in Hawaii compared to big cities on the mainland? Jim, I'm not sure that big cities on the mainland are a good comparison. What I hear about schools in big cities on the mainland, they're pretty poor. The public school systems. I would generally speaking rate Hawaii, unless things have changed. I'd put Hawaii public schools in sort of like the lower on the scale, certainly below in the lower half of public school quality, generally speaking, if not even lower than half than the 50% point. And
I would like to add, my wife's been a school teacher for like 15 years. So if I have some personal experience here,
yes.
The reality is it's not the school, it's the parents, right? I mean, there are kids that thrive, that are very successful in schools that are not necessarily successful because they have parents that care and parents that push them and get them enrichment activities. So at the end of the day, I would worry less about the school and more about what you're doing to be involved with your child's education. And we're seeing that today with the distance learning. The kids that have a good home environment, that are being monitored, that are being supervised, are thriving and doing just fine. It's the ones that don't have that same level of care that are having a really hard time. So I would say let's not dump on Hawaii public schools. Yes, there's plenty of success stories from all over the place, from schools that don't necessarily have a great reputation.
Thank you, Dylan, for that perspective. That's really, really useful. What has been? I mean, has there been any feedback since your wife is a public school teacher? What's been the feedback on kind of how things have changed on this sort of new Zoom video conferencing world?
My take on it is it's really exacerbating the economic divide. You have kids that have good internet access and great technology in their home that are doing just fine. It's the ones that are working off of a 10-year-old iPad or their parents' phone that obviously are not going to have the same experience learning online as someone who has good technology and more modern technology. So that's been the biggest struggle, I think, is that the kids are not, they're being delivered equal content, but not in equivalent platforms. And that's been the biggest challenge for teachers, I think, is that you don't have kids with equal access to the same type of technology.
Yeah, that's a really good. Scott, you took a breath there to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the issues over here in particular, and I don't know how it is on the outer islands, but there's a mix of diversity of a number of immigrants that have come here where English is a second language. So already in the classrooms, especially in the urban core here, teachers you're teaching, but when English isn't their first language, they're having to basically drop the entire class load down to that portion. Now you add in COVID with distant learning and technology add into it, it's going to compound that issue even more. And that's been part of the drag on some of the public school system here is some of the challenges that they have, especially with kids with that English is a second language for them. They tend to struggle. It's harder for them to keep up and whatnot. So the classroom tends to slow down. You have this huge disparity between the kids at the top of the class and kids that are struggling to keep up.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Those are all serious challenges that we all face, and I hope that's given everyone shed some light on the public school question over here. All right, let's move on. It's we've got about 20 minutes to go here. I want to transition to talk about our diamonds and deals. And boy, you guys, you folks have put together some pretty insane properties over here for us to look at. So what we do in this segment, everyone, is our diamonds and deals are aspirational properties or example properties of what you can kind of get in Hawaii. It's not meant to sell anything per se. It's meant to give you a peek, a window into the kind of things that are available. There's some diamonds that are amazing, and there's some deals that are, relatively speaking, good deals. So let's open up with this first one. This is always kind of fun. I was going through this. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing, Scott. So here's Scott's Oceanfront, not Scott's, but well, hopefully, love to be Scott's, love to be mine. Oceanfront Estate Home Kailua, listed for $27.5 million. That's got to be some kind of a record, Scott. Fill us in on this property. This is amazing.
Yeah, so part of the reason I picked this is because this is the top end for Kailua, and this is actually going to be more or less the top end for the island of Oahu. So the highest sale that ever happened in Kailua was $25 million. This one's listed at $27.5 million. It's over an acre. It's 60,000 square feet of land. Which an acre is about 44,000 square feet of land. It's about an acre and a quarter.
In Kailua, that's
on
like
the
acre,
beach.
that's like an acre and a half on the beach in Kailua. Oh my God.
Yeah, 14,000 square feet on two main home structures. It has everything: tennis court, sauna, pool, pool table, the whole 9 yards. And it's significantly detailed out. Even the covered lanai space has more square footage than my house does. But I wanted to show it for perspective. That's beachside. Those are where you have your estate lots, your bigger properties. And the further you get back from the ocean in that area, you start to get into Coconut Grove and things, the smaller the lot size gets and the further away you get from the ocean. So you have this effect of significant price dropping going down, because of the size of the lot gets smaller and you're getting further from the ocean. But that's the top, that's the high end on Kailua, and on the island more or less.
I mean, just and from these pictures alone, if I said, "Oh, this is a new resort that opened up in Kailua," you'd say, "Yeah, sign me up for their resort." That is an amazing property. Somebody's got some aircraft overhead over there. I don't know who that is, but try to mute your mic if you can. All right, that's an amazing, no doubt. That's I guess we would call that a diamond. I don't know about deal, but man, what a diamond. Oh my God. Okay, let's move on. So Dylan, not to be totally outdone, gives us the Big Island version. And he says Oceanfront in Keahou Bay listed at 5.999. Man, that's amazing. Dylan, what about this?
Yeah, I guess mine looks like a deal compared to Scott's, but something similar, and it's definitely a diamond and almost priceless. This is on Keahou Bay, which is a historic, beautiful place if you're familiar with Kona, and there's not that many properties. So that's a big difference, is that there's maybe 6 or 7 properties that are kind of on the bay. There's a resort area and a condo area. So there aren't that many single family homes. And so something like this is very unique to come on the market and to be available. And, at $6 million, it's a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, big home. Beautiful setting right on the water, and you don't necessarily have the sandy beach like you do in Kailua, but you got a pool right in front, and you have a boat harbor, a short walk away, and some beach access area. So just super special, unique property that doesn't come on the market very often.
This is a mind blower. What that looks like? It's almost looks like it's on its own island.
It's like on a peninsula, like right on the point. Yeah,
this crazy peninsula that's just big enough to hold this classic. Looks like a kind of a Polynesian hut kind of style with the super tall ceilings. That's got to be those views, and it's stunning, absolutely stunning. When I saw this, I just kind of kept looking at it.
Yeah, you can look to the left and the right and not see anything but ocean, right? I mean, there's no houses to the left or to the right of it.
No, it's like, man, you're just kind of like on your own, basically your own private island. And Kinaya loves it. Yeah, what a dream. You're not kidding, boy. What a dream. That would be, what an amazing property. This is great stuff. Scott and Dylan, you folks have done like an amazing job over here. And not to be outdone, Heidi has given us something that like, hey, you know what? Maybe I'll buy this. Heidi, what's this? This is a beach. Looks like a amazing property in Maui for only the low price of $595. Fill us in.
Yeah, well, compared to those other two properties we just saw, I mean, this is all, at only $595. A lot of people are surprised to find they can get something that's on a sandy beach in Maui for this price. This is a 1-bedroom, 1-bath condominium. It's about 700 square feet. It's literally about 12 steps down, and then you walk out and you're on that beach with the sea turtle right there. They do allow vacation rentals at this property, so it's great for somebody that's looking for a part-time home that wants the option to rent it. And it's just on this beautiful little pristine bay, great for snorkeling, swimming. I mean, you're right there for $595.
So I can't help but kind of try to run through the numbers on this. What kind of roughly speaking, if you were to rent this, say you were the kind that like we have snowbird friends who live in Canada and they come to Hawaii for the winter months and they go back to Canada for 6 to 9 months. What would you think this thing normally would rent for in a non-COVID world? I don't know if you're familiar with what it did rent for in the past. Any sense of that?
That's a great question. If you are interested, I can get you the rental history. I mean, I would say $200 to $300 a night on average, a property like this, if you want a ballpark.
Wow, $200 to $300 a night. Okay, so when we do I can't do the math in my head right now. I can only do single digit mathematics now. My brain is completely atrophied. I have to have a calculator for anything else. But it certainly seems that you'd be you could do a positive cash flow on this without too much effort. And I wanted to say something above here, Dylan. Your camera shot looks just great. I think that the combination of your bright red shirt with the sun on you right now and the clouds behind you, I just had to kind of say that. I just kind of had to throw that one in over there. It looks great over there. You're muted. Unmute yourself.
The sun finally came up over the trees, and I'm getting it right in the face. So.
Yeah, I'll tell you, that's really really amazing. All right, we got a few minutes left. Let's see. I think we had a couple pop. Oh yeah, here we had a question that popped in. This is for you, Dylan. Let's bring this one up from Teresa here. She said, by the way, Dylan mentioned the country, reminding me of something I was researching, how we could bring weapons over, and also if Hawaii has concealed carry law. Part of what I learned is that it is okay to carry a long arm rifle. So my question is, what is being hunted there and where? So there's a couple of questions in that one, Dylan. I think there's first of all, we have a sort of a conceal and carry thing. That's one question. The other thing is, how do you bring your firearms over? And number two, and number 3 or 4 is, what's the hunting situation like? You want to start us off with that?
Yeah, this is something I'm familiar with. I'm an avid gun owner and hunter. So perfect. Our gun laws are pretty strict here. So in order to bring firearms over, what you have to do is, I believe it's within 10 days. Don't quote me on that. It's on the county websites, but you have to go to the local police department and register the firearms. So they're obviously going to do a background check and do all the other things that it takes to qualify you to carry a firearm. But that's if you're bringing them in. To acquire a firearm, if it's a rifle, you have to go and get a permit. It takes about 2 weeks. So they run your background check, take your fingerprints, and then in about 2 weeks, they get back to you and tell you you're approved. And they issue you a permit, which is good for 1 year. And you can acquire as many long guns as you would like within that year. After you purchase it, you have to take it down to the county police department and then register the gun with them. So that's just for rifles. If you want to buy a handgun, you have to actually get a specific permit for that handgun. So first you have to go to an NRA approved handgun safety course or the state hunter education course to even apply for a permit. And then once you have that, you can apply for a permit, and you actually have to have the serial number of the handgun that you want to acquire. So you can only get the permit for that specific firearm. And then once you get the permit, you have to bring the firearm physically into the police department and register it with them like you would a rifle. So that's the registration process. It's pretty complicated and cumbersome. It doesn't happen very quickly, but it is what it is. From a concealed carry, technically there's concealed carry on the books, but you have to get a permit from the county chief of police, and they basically do not issue them. So there are very few like retired policemen that may have them that work in some type of security firm. But if you're a regular person on the street, it's pretty much impossible for you to get a concealed carry permit. So don't count on doing that. From a hunting standpoint, we have limited public hunting areas. We do have goats, sheep. There are deer on Maui. But most hunters, and lots of pigs. There's no shortage of pigs. Lots of pigs to hunt too. But most hunters do it on private land. You have ranch lands or large farms where people hunt. So there are public hunting recreation areas, but they're few and far between. And then obviously they're crowded and there's not as many animals there because there's more people.
Boy, thank you, Dylan. I just got an expert whirlwind tour on all that stuff. That's fantastic. I mean, I'm roughly familiar with the laws on Oahu. They're somewhat similar to what you mentioned. Lots of permitting that's required. Concealed and carry, you have to get a thing from the chief of police, and they're rarely handed out and all that kind of stuff. Heidi, is there anything that you know about that you can add to what Dylan's saying? I know the laws are different on each of the islands. Is there anything that you can shed light on that Dylan hasn't done so already from the Maui side? You want to make sure you unmute your mic. Yeah.
Yeah, firearms and hunting are not really my area of expertise. I do know a lot of people that enjoy going pig hunting. That kind of seems to be a thing. And there's a couple people in my office that are into hunting, and I could probably get some answers, but yeah, I'm not personally a hunter. So.
I know you grew up in a small town in Illinois. I'm sure you have relatives that go hunting out there. I know my dad used to. We lived in Illinois when I was a kid, and my dad used to go hunting occasionally. I don't know if your dad or uncles or anyone hunts back in Illinois or not.
One more important note: we do have a restriction on handguns, only 10-round magazines. So if you have magazines, if you're coming here and bringing something with you, do not bring magazines that are more than 10 rounds because you will be committing a felony, I believe. So don't do that.
Okay. Thanks, Dylan, for the additional tip. Scott, is there anything that you want to add to Dylan's point on the firearm side?
No, that was pretty thorough, but I had to send out a link the other day to somebody for this exact same question. And each county, if you Google, firearms registration in the county, the websites are very detailed and have this step-by-step information there on those websites. You can look them up online.
Here's a quick one from Alex. Alex says, "Aloha, great show today. Mahalo. What advice would you give to a timeshare salesperson currently furloughed?" Heidi, why don't we start with you on that? What would you say to Alex here, who's a furloughed timeshare salesperson?
Well, it's a great question, and I'm sure there's many other people out there in that situation right now. I mean, the way to answer it would really be just asking some more questions about your personal situation and what works for you. I mean, there's, a lot of people here I know are counting on an eventual reopening. I don't think any of us know exactly when that's going to happen. So I think it just kind of depends how long that you're comfortable being on this furlough and just living out on Maui. I know, it's a time to think about what you want to do. Are there other career goals you want to pursue, other things you want to pursue? I mean, it's a good time to travel. It's a good time to take time. Well, actually, it's a horrible time to travel, but I mean, around enjoy Maui. If you're lucky enough to be on Maui, it's a great time to enjoy it because there's not that many people here, and it's a great time to be here and enjoy. So if you're able to do that, that's great. But I mean, I do understand the pressures of not having a job too. And I mean, I don't think any of us have a true answer of when timeshares are going to start back up again. I mean, I wish I knew for sure. I can only think we're getting closer, but it's just kind of where we are.
No, that's a really good point. I think so. I think in what you've very nicely and elegantly, Heidi, have said, timeshare is just as furloughed here as it is where you're at. And this thing, because of the way the COVID and because of the lockdown, everything is pretty much essentially on hold, and we hope it's going to open up soon. But nothing coming around. Hey, gang, we got about 5 minutes left. I did want to hit a topic over here that comes up a bunch of times in a variety of ways, and I want to go around really quick. And the big headline here is best way to find rental. Now, the specific example here is from Karen, who says, need to find 2 months of lodging to do work with AmeriCorps on Maui. Any suggestions? Probably near Pukalani. Thanks for any help. But let's hit the topic, because we had about this conversation off camera last week, where we talked about sort of what should you do if you want to find rentals, and there's no really well established sort of rental agents here in Hawaii that are geared. There's a variety of of economic reasons why that doesn't work, and so the question is, what's the best way to find rentals? Scott, what's your advice when someone says, look, we need to find some rentals? What should we do to find this places to rent? Where do we go?
I mean, right now it's Airbnb, VRBO, Zillow. I think it's apartments.com. Those are kind of the main ones. It's going to the websites. And now, because we don't have the tourists, this is the time to be able to find the affordable rental and negotiate more flexible terms. Whether you have a pet, people are going to be more flexible if you have a pet to be able to get in even in that capacity. So it's hitting the main sites and negotiating. And there was another question about pets as well. So basically what you're saying is hit the main sites: Airbnb, VRBO, apartments. I think it's apartments.com or something like that. There's apartments. Yeah. So Dylan, what's your advice on finding a rental?
This is a real conundrum right now, and I get asked this. I mean, because we've talked about it, but I get asked this almost weekly, multiple times weekly, and so you have to figure out, okay, do you want a long-term rental, which is really like 6+ months, or do you want a short-term rental, which is going to be 30 minus days plus days, somewhere in there. But the problem is that if you're looking for like a 2 or 3 month rental to come here and serve a quarantine and look for property, the short-term rentals are basically shut down. On our island, our mayor and planning department have interpreted that if you're a short-term rental, you can't take off your hat as a short-term rental and then long-term rent, which would be over the 30-day short-term rental definition. And then if you go to the long-term rental market, which you need to go to there's several companies that do long-term rental management. They are not necessarily going to consider a 2 or 3 month rental because they want a 6 month or a 12-month lease on those properties. So you're in a real catch-22 on the Big Island right now, specifically because of the short-term rental pretty much being shut down. If you're coming from somewhere, it's basically illegal right now for a short-term rental to rent to someone who has to serve their quarantine. So if you need to come here and serve your quarantine, you have to do it in a hotel.
And what does the quarantine? But you still can't. Let's say you're past quarantine, you still can't do a short-term rental because the short-term rentals are all shut down. So you still have that, right?
Technically, I believe you can. If they're local on island, you can rent to somebody who's local on island who is not serving their quarantine. It's a quarantine restriction that.
So it's a quarantine restriction.
Prohibits you. Yeah.
Okay. So if I got this right, what you want to do on the Big Island is you want to serve out your quarantine 14 days at a hotel property. Get a nice one. But once you've served out that 14-day, then you can perhaps find a short-term rental that's available to you. Is that right?
Correct.
Excellent. Great. Heidi, what's your this originated as a Maui question here. How would you respond? What's the best way to find rentals in Maui?
Yeah, great question. Well, I'm not sure when Karen is planning on coming out to Maui and if that quarantine requirement is going to be in effect or not, but I think Dylan touched on that. As far as in Pukalani, it's really not a resort area. You're not going to find short-term rentals, and Maui County defines a long-term rental as at least 6 months or 180 days. So I really think your best bet, because you are going there for AmeriCorps, is to just do some networking, Craigslist, Facebook, network, maybe through a church or community center or something. I mean, I think it's going to be more of a word of mouth thing, finding somebody has an extra space to house you. I don't think there's any formal rental agency that's really going to have something. They'll be advertising for 2 months in Pukalani. But it never hurts to reach out to some long-term rental managers and just ask the question and do a little networking. And, you know, I'm confident you can find something. But yeah, on Maui, there are not full-time realtors assisting people with rentals because generally the demand for rentals is just so high here. I mean, people find rentals quickly and there's no need for realtors to be involved.
So what would be your generic advice? Say let's take Pukalani out of it. What's your generic advice for people that want to find a place to rent on Maui? Let's say while they're looking at properties or things of that nature, what would your response be?
Well, if they have to come in quarantine, they should stay in a hotel. I mean, unless they own a property or have a friend that owns a property, they can stay in. They can't rent a vacation rental if they're subject to the quarantine.
So is that like the Big Island where if you're in quarantine, you can't stay at sort of a short-term vacation rental? You'd want to serve out your 14 days on a hotel property and then perhaps go to a vacation rental for a slightly longer rent? Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Got it.
Here's my simple advice. Don't be picky. Just take what you can get. If it's a rental, it's temporary. So don't have all these crazy requirements. And another big one, try not to bring your pet because that'll eliminate a vast majority of rentals if you need to have a pet. And
this goes to, again, I mean, pets overall are more difficulty, but certainly for the short-term thing, if you're looking to rent for a month or two, just to kind of do your looking around, see if you could leave your pet at a pet hotel where you're back, where you live while you do your searching. So if I quickly summarize this, because this comes up a lot, quick summarize is you want to serve out your quarantine at a hotel property, get that done, and then look at the openings that are available through the Airbnb, VRBO, those sort of places where you can kind of stay at a short-term rental that's outside of quarantine. Do I have that right, gang? Is there any kind of a correction that needs to be made? Scott's got a point.
Yeah, Oahu's not the same. So you can go straight in. And I would say if you're looking for housing to buy real estate, then so this is a different answer. You quarantine for 14 days. Then how long, unless you know exactly where you're going to be and that property is on the market, okay, how long do you need for that next property to come up and for you to find it and get familiar with the areas and the neighborhoods? It may take 60 days. Then you got a 45-day escrow. Then you want to move in, say you need 2 weeks. You're looking 4 to 6 months that you really need on that rental time frame. The other thing I would say with the pet is there are quarantine laws here, and you can avoid those quarantine laws. We probably should discuss that at some point and have that.
Another show. That's another show. Yeah, a pet quarantine, which is always.
How do you avoid pet quarantine? But for me, I recommend minimum 3 months to 6 months is what you need if you're looking for property.
So if you're looking for so the big differences are on Oahu. You can go straight into a short-term rental, a 3 to 6 month short-term rental if you're looking for real estate. Again, this is the context of looking for real estate. On the Big Island and on Maui, you first need to serve out your 14-day quarantine at a hotel property. Then you can move into a short-term rental. And I think to Heidi's point, this is where your networking is going to be really important. Okay, final word over here. Scott, Teresa just gave us sort of a heads up on this. I think Heidi's beachfront property is going to be competing. I know that Teresa is looking for property on Oahu. Yeah, Teresa, we might all be competing for that 1-bedroom Maui beachfront property. I might want to kind of look into that myself. All right, gang. I think we're actually a little bit over our time. It's 10:03. I want to thank everyone for being a part of our show here. We're going to see you again in 2 weeks. livinginhawaii.com. If you haven't already gone to the website, go there, get on the newsletter. We send out all the notices. We will send this show as a link that you can watch the DVR'd version of it. All right, let's kind of go a quick around, say goodbye to everybody. Just go around the right. So Scott, Heidi, and Dylan in that order.
Aloha, everybody. Thanks for checking in.
All right. See y'all.
All right. See you guys. Aloha.
See y'all later. Have a great one. Thanks, everybody. Aloha.